Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 8 of Down to the Wire. As you can tell, I'm the Shark alongside the Breadstick. And welcome to Down the Wire, like I said, episode 8, where this episode is dedicated to the Black Mamba himself, Kobe Bryant. And man, we're just going to go through the impact he's made through the game because it has been 1 year since the passing of him. And man, it still doesn't feel real, if I'm being completely honest. But hey, let's get right to it. So Gabe, start off. What were your thoughts on Kobe Bryant? Like what did you think of him?
Well, obviously, you can't leave out Kobe Bryant and probably even top 10 players of all time. Maybe top 5 if you want to argue that. He's definitely right behind Jordan for best shooting guard of all time. Um, it took a lot of Jordan's game and implemented it to his own, and especially in the early throughout the 2000s, late 90s, um, early 2010s. But he's just an all-around great superstar, and just his mentality to play the game of basketball and just knowing what he knew, and just even though if he had like a selfish ball hog attitude, he still was able to get a lot done on the court by himself, because some rings he did get with Shaq, some other rings he did get with Paul Gasol, but other rings he did kind of do by himself. But all in all, he's just one of the greats, and you can't ever forget Kobe Bryant. And I know for a lot of people, they're like, you could argue that he is better than Jordan, or Jordan better than Kobe, or Kobe better than LeBron. But that's why that argument is made, because he's such a great player, and I think he impacted a lot of people, especially in today's modern era, to play the way that they did.
Like that. I like that. Uh, I agree for the most part. I mean, like the rings he got and the impact he's made on the court has been a big one. He's fourth all time scoring. He was third at one point, but then LeBron passed him in the all time scoring list. So, a 5 time champion, a double digit all star. I think he made the all star 16 times. Made the playoffs for the majority of his career. I mean, like what has he not done? And and I remember like the moment he scored 81 points in a game. Like, I mean, that's the second best scoring game of all time, behind Wilt, who scored 100. And it's like even like if you like didn't know basketball, like you knew of Kobe Bryant. Like that's how big of an impact he made.
By the way, he did make 16. He made 18 All Star games, not making this 1997 and the 1999 one.
Uh, and so he had like he made all but two.
Yeah,
That's impressive. And he stuck with one team for 20 years of the Los Angeles Lakers.
yeah.
Impressive indeed. So the next part is, obviously, made a big impact, like we just discussed. And, like he did have great teammates throughout all the years. I mean, obviously, the big one was Shaq. So, Gabe, where do you rank Kobe and Shaq in like the all-time duos?
I think you have to put them at least top 5, if not top 3. Because yes, Jordan and Pippen were probably one of the greatest duos of all time to do it. Then you could argue Curry and Durant, or Curry and Thompson. Then you could argue D Wade and LeBron. Then you could argue Shaq and Kobe. Then you could argue Magic and Wilt, or
Kareem,
Magic and Kareem. And you could argue, who was Larry Bird's
right
dynamic
hand
duo?
man, Kevin McHale.
Yeah, I guess you could say that too. Not as much, but there's just a lot of good duos that have been in there, but you can't really put them lower than 2 or 3, in my opinion, just because the only arguable one was Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, who went 6 for 6. But besides that, I
Mhm.
can't really see anybody else beating them.
I like it. I like it. And with them winning 3 titles, and then unfortunately in 2004. You know, when the Lakers added Gary Payton and Karl Malone, and on paper it was like, yeah, these guys are the champs. But they lost to Detroit Pistons with Chauncey Billups, Richard Hamilton, and Ben Wallace. But then whenever after that year, Shaq left the Lakers, and then Kobe had to do it pretty much by himself. He didn't get that far in the playoffs, and losing first round to the prime Suns of Nash, Marion, and Amari. And then in 2006, like I said, the year he scored 81, I would say that he missed is that he got robbed of MVP that year, only because he scored 81 points. Agree or disagree?
I would have to disagree on that one, only because. So then, are we saying? So then, according to going to your point, then we could say that Devin Booker should have won MVP for getting 70 points. That doesn't make sense. Just because he did it one game doesn't mean that it kind of surrounds the whole regular season, you know?
Well, then you also have to realize that he did score 35 points a game that year. And then the MVP that year in 2006 was Steve Nash.
Mm-hmm.
And he had like 19 points and like 11 assists.
But but just because it's not a points game, if it was, then I guess we would give it to James Harden every single year because he scores over 35 points per game. But we don't. Why? Because it's not what wins games. Just because Kobe was able to do it so often, but he had a different mentality than James Harden did. But what's gonna overlook is how well can you lead your team, and in those few years between 2004 and when was his next championship? 08, 09?
2008.
2008?
No, 2009 and then 2010.
So 09, 04, 09. Like, he was still a great player, don't get me wrong, but like he didn't really go that far compared to all his other years. So that's why, just because he did score 81 doesn't mean you give him the trophy for MVP. I think there was definitely up because the Suns with Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire was still pretty good. They did really well for what they did. The Mavericks were doing pretty well with Dirk, and the Sonics were starting to tear off a little bit ever since Ray Allen left.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just don't think you can give it to someone based off of one game. If we did that, then we would be giving Curry the MVP right now for 62. You know, that doesn't make sense, especially because the Warriors are what, the 7th seed right now, or the 9th seed, one of the two.
I think they're 8th.
8th, 7th, 8th, 9th, around that spot. But like, you can't give the award based off of one game. It's gonna be based off the entire regular season.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I see your point. And then he did win MVP though in 2008 when he led the Lakers to the finals and against the Celtics with Ray Allen, Pierce, and Garnett. Celtics won that year. And then Kobe went to the finals 2 more times. That's when he went back to back, beating young Dwight Howard and again beating the Celtics. And then he had help of Pau Gasol. So Gabe, like, what were your thoughts on the? I mean, you obviously listed Kobe and Shaq. What were your thoughts on the Kobe and Pau Gasol duo?
I mean, Kobe and Pau Gasol, don't get me wrong, was still a great duo for what happened, because Pau Gasol was still a great center in the NBA. He did tear off a little bit after leaving the Lakers, and where did he go after the Lakers? I think, did he go Memphis, or was that before?
Because before he went to the Lakers, he was on Memphis.
Okay, then what happened afterwards? Because he's on the Bucks, or no, he last played for the Bucks, but he's on. He went to the Bulls. He went to the Bulls afterwards. But yeah, after that whole, I mean, there's still a great duo. They're no Kobe and Shaq because Pau Gasol will never be as good as Shaq was. But I still think that was still a great duo for its time. I think there's also a lot of other players on that roster you can't mention. You can't not mention, like I'm trying to think. Derek Fisher, I think, was on that roster for some time. Roy Hibbert, I think, was on that roster a little bit too.
Artest.
Ron
Don't
Artest,
forget
yeah.
about him.
He was on that roster for a little bit. Yeah, there was a bunch of good players that helped contribute. It's like when you look at, let's say, the Bulls, you can't just look at Michael Jordan. You got to look at Scottie Pippen. You got to look at Dennis Rodman. You got to look at Steve Kerr. You got to look at some other players that were notable
Coach.
for that. Yeah, Phil Jackson. Um, Even Phil Jackson coached the Lakers for a little bit before he went to the Knicks. But again, you can't really overlook him. And I mean, yes, Kobe and Jordan were good players, but what made them good was one, their talent and ability on the floor, but two, just the people that they surround themselves with. It's like you can't say LeBron is the LeBron without D Wade, Bosh, Kyrie. Like, yes, he was a good player before all this, but he didn't win championships and really make a name for himself in the NBA till this happened.
Got you. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and I agree with what you said. And then after the 2010 title, that's when the Mavericks swept him in the second round the following year, and then the year after that they lost to the Thunder, and I think that was pretty much their last playoff appearance. Because whenever they added Dwight Howard and Steve Nash, the Lakers, I mean, like they really didn't do much, and plus like Nash was getting old, and Dwight Howard, like he wasn't as good as he used to be.
Yeah.
And then once those guys left, and then I remember your boy Jeremy Lin. He played for the Lakers.
He played a season for the Lakers. But he did. But him and Jeremy Lin wants his own team because that's where he thrives the best. But he wasn't going to get that till Kobe left. So then he went to the Hornets, played a backup role, but then went to the Nets to get his starting spot, but ended up with injuries. Then went to the Hawks to be more of a veteran. Then went to the Raptors to get his ring, and then went to China. Is now back on the G League. But let's not keep. But another fun fact: Jeremy Lin actually has the same birthday as Kobe Bryant.
Wow, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting for sure. And yeah, like I said about Kobe, I mean, then obviously in 2016, that's when he hung up the shoes, called it a career. So now my question is, it's going to be a little challenging. 8 or 24?
For me, I think 8 for two reasons. One,
okay.
I think when I think of Kobe Bryant, I think the 8 number looks better with his name and with his stuff, and just like with who he is. I think 8 is more representable. Even though he wore half and half, I just think 8 was a better number for him. And 2, I think that he was just a lot more of a monster when he was 8. I feel like when he turned to 24, he was a little bit more older. He was a little bit more wiser, so he was able to calm down more and be more of that down to earth player who, yes, he was still dominant, don't get me wrong, but I feel like he was more energetic and more alive when he wore 8 compared to when he wore 24.
I get where you're coming from, but for me, I'll have to say 24, only because like he had to face like more of a tougher competition, and he was more the main guy on the team. Because when he was wearing number 8, he had Shaq as his right hand man. Like that was more of Shaq's team rather than Kobe's team. You know, whenever Shaq left, that was when Kobe took over, and then ever since then, that was Kobe's team. And then 24, he won 2 titles, went back to back. I mean, he beat the prime Celtics of Allen Pierce, Garnett, and then, I mean, he was more mature. I mean, with number 8, I mean, like I said before, I mean, he went to the 04 finals with a super team, supposedly, you know, with Shaq, Gary Payton, and Karl Malone, and they lost because he basically thought he could do it himself, and he single-handedly brought them down, and that's the reason why the Pistons won. So that's the only reason why I would go 24 over number 8, even though 8 did win more titles than him and scored more points. But The 24 was just more wiser. So
Yeah.
then that brings me to my next question. What you
Well,
were saying?
like I was gonna say I agree with the whole wiser thing. I just what I don't agree with what you said is that I don't necessarily think it was Shaq's team. I think it was both of their team. I think like because um you can basically say any team that LeBron went to is more of his team, and whatever team or when the Warriors is Steph Curry's team, even though Kevin Durant went. But like with let's say with the 2012 to 2016 Thunder, you can't really put a big number on whose team that was. I think it was more shared between Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook more than it being like one person's team over the other person's team. I think they did both the same amount of work for that team to take it where it went. And I think Shaq and Kobe is both of their team. I don't think it was necessarily one or the other just because of how dominant they were. Because if you think about it, they were both able to win rings after they split. Like the Lakers still won their rings. Shaq won his rings with the Heat. So I think that there's still a big difference between both players, and it's hard to you can rank positions, but it's hard to rank players based on different positions. It's hard to compare Curry to Yao Ming. Like that's just you. It's hard to compare those two players because they do two different things on the court, and their impact is completely different. So that's why I don't want to say whose team was over whose team. I think they both were very great superstars, and I think they both helped their Lakers get to the championship and win multiple championships. And then when they split, they were still able to both win championships.
Ah, I see. And also, for a fun fact, whenever the Lakers three-peated, in 2000, they had Glenn Rice, which was supposedly called Baby Jordan. It was a good three-point shooter. And then 2001, they had Horace Grant, won a title with them. And in 2002, they had Mitch Richmond. So that's just a fun fact I want to throw in there on one of Kobe's teammates that he had that he won titles with. And then, which brings us to our next question of what is your favorite Kobe Bryant memory?
I have two, and I think they're both against the Magic. So I don't know if this first one was in the finals, but I know the second one was. But the first one is this is just an iconic Kobe moment. Is when Matt Barnes was inbounding the ball and he threw it at Kobe's face, like fake threw it, but Kobe didn't even flinch because that just shows how lethal and how stone faced he was, and that's just shows that ice cold killer that's in his blood. And I think that's when we knew that Kobe was going to be a all time great, if we didn't already know it at all. But then my second moment is there's just this play that he did against Dwight Howard in the finals against the Magic, and it was this weird move. It was like he jumped in the air and had it leaning against his right shoulder, then brought it over to his left shoulder while he had defenders in the air, and laid it in. He kind of like lobbed it in with his left hand. It was a pretty cool move, and I don't see anybody do anything like that. And it just showed how athletic and how much control he had over the ball. And I think that's a really cool move if you can pull it off. And he was one of not many to be able to do stuff like that.
Interesting. I mean, he definitely had some great moments against the Magic, and then there was one moment they had against the Magic when it was Dwight Howard's rookie season. Kobe flew by someone, and then he absolutely dunked it on Dwight Howard, and that was pretty crazy. And then another one that he had, I'm gonna have two as well. So, whenever in the 2000 playoffs, whenever they won their first championship conference finals against Portland, Kobe had that ISO, crossed over, basically the iconic moment of Kobe lobbing it to Shaq, crowd goes bananas and all that. Went on to win a finals. Well, went on to the finals and all that stuff. And then another memory they had is it was against Dallas, where the Mavericks basically they had him in the corner, they had him trapped. It was like shot clock was really low, and then he was trapped, and like he turned around and shot a three with his left hand, and it went in, and that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was definitely super super big. All
For
right.
sure. And now one more question, and then because we are running a little bit short on time. So Kobe Bryant, he is getting. I think he did get inducted into Hall of Fame this year. I'm not sure, but yeah, he was inducted into Hall of Fame along with Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett. So who do you think would do his speech? Like, which NBA legend would do his speech? Like, I'll take this one. I'll take this one.
Okay.
So that I honestly think that Shaq would do his speech only because like he was pretty much like a big brother to him. Like they did so much together. Obviously, they won 3 titles. Yes, I mean they did have a little beef here and there, but then they got resolved. I mean, I think it's pretty much like the brotherhood of that. So honestly, I think Shaq will do his Hall of Fame speech. How about you?
I agree with that answer, but I'm gonna keep it different because that's just it makes it more interesting. I think actually Jordan would do his speech because we saw at Corey's memorial that he got up and gave his little speech as well. I'm pretty sure Shaq did as well, but I just think that since we all compared Kobe and Michael Jordan so much because they one played the same position and two had similar playing styles. I think that their bond was probably stronger than Kobe and Shaq's was at the time. So
Hmm?
I think that to me it would make sense if Michael Jordan did it, but I wouldn't argue against Shaq doing it as well.
Interesting. I agree. So I believe that's all the time we have for today. If you like this video, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. And so that we'll give you more content. We upload videos every T days, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And we'll see you next time. Peace.
Oh, don't forget, we do have a Instagram page now up. We'll leave it in the description below so you guys can go follow that. We'll give you some news about what we're doing. Like maybe we'll give you some news when we post, and we'll show you some other cool basketball things that we are doing with our time. Because there is probably going to be more as soon as COVID ends, or we just decide to plan things that we'll probably do with basketball, maybe other basketball videos instead of just podcast. Because again, we both love playing basketball, and we've got some other friends that we play basketball with too. So maybe we'll create some fun videos with actually implementing those skills into the videos rather than just hearing our voices. Maybe we'll talk about some players and their moves and some no notable things that they've done. Maybe we'll play some pickup. We'll see. But make sure you do go check out that Instagram channel that we are or Instagram page that we are starting because a lot of our some of our other content will be displayed on there as well.
For sure.
And yeah, so that's all the time we have today. Like Dalton said, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. We're gonna bring you a lot of basketball content. We already have a couple other episodes out, so if you haven't watched those, make sure you check those out. We do a lot of good discussion over um, different types of things, current and present. I mean, past NBA eras, and yeah. So make sure you do that. Check out my other two channels in the about page in the channels page to go see what I have. And make sure you follow us at our social medias under our little things. And yeah, we'll see y'all next time. Peace.